from Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, and I want to just share this word with you because it's precious in his eyes, precious in his eyes. So Mark 5, and I've chopped out some of the stuff that maybe would just not be so necessary for today's word. So here I go. They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasene. And when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tomb with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one was able to bind him any more, even with chains, because he had often been bound with chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles had been broken to pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gashing himself with stones. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him and shouted with a loud voice. He said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was speaking and asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for there are many." Move on a bit. The herdsman ran away and reported in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed, sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came up and on seeing him fell at his feet and imploring him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." And he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. A woman who had an hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. After hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak, for she thought, "If I just touch his garments, I will get well." Immediately, the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Immediately, Jesus, perceiving in himself that power proceeded out from him, and had gone forth, turned around and said to the crowd, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, 'Who touched my garments? Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole story. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." And while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any more?" But Jesus, overhearing what they were speaking, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." Now, taking the child by the hand, he said to her, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. I like Jesus because he listens to them. Did you hear what I said? He listens to them. No matter who they are, no matter what he is doing, no matter where he is going, no matter what, he has time to listen to them. Now, how does that make you feel? The thought that Jesus is prepared to listen to them, and Jesus is prepared to listen to you. What I said last week about his mercy is true this week about him listening. Last week I said everything Jesus is, God is. And everything God is, Jesus is. Jesus looks like God because Jesus is God. The John 1:14 says this, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. That's who he is. God the Son. Jesus said, everything I am, he is. And everything he is, I am. Jesus came to reveal God to a world in darkness, to show the world God. Now, creation screams at us that there is a creator. I know lots of people say lots of peculiar things, but for me, creation screams at us there's a creator. In Romans 1:20 it says this, for the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what he has made, so that they are without excuse. Creation declares the reality of a creator. But Jesus goes further. Jesus, who is God, reveals God as Father. He told us in the prayer, our Father who art in heaven. He reveals to us Father. That's why I like Jesus. It's because he listens to us and he reveals to us God. Now, I have chosen 3 stories to comment on from Mark 5, where Jesus demonstrates the reality of him listening to people. I only chose 3 stories, but there are many, many, many more. Now, Mark 5 talks about a man who is called Legion, the woman who has an issue of blood, and Jairus' daughter who has died. So I asked the question, what is it then to listen? To pay attention. I wonder, do you pay attention? Now I know there'll be a few sniggers there. Do you pay attention? To the people around you, do you listen to them? To listen is to give your ear and your heart to another. To show that you care. To express compassion. To listen is to simply demonstrate love to a fellow human being. And Jesus demonstrates that love by listening to these 3 people in this chapter in Mark. What breaks down relationships more than anything else is when people feel like they are not being heard, when they feel like they are not being listened to. To listen is to value, and to not listen is to devalue. Now, Jesus values you, and he listens to you, and he listens to these three people in this story. And if Jesus listens, then God listens. If Jesus values, then God values. God values you. And that's why he listens to you. That's why he listens to us. Jesus, who is God, had time for all who come to him. That's not some. That's not only the nice people, the best people, the quality people. No, Jesus has time for all who come to him. And God, our Heavenly Father, has time for you today. The Bible shows us all. Jesus says, all who come to him. All. Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, Jesus says. I will give you rest. The story about the man who was called Legion. Well, an interesting guy. Maybe you've met one or two of these sorts of people in life. But the story, as Mark reveals it, conveys brokenness and insight into the heart of a man who had given himself over to the practice of rebellion and self-harming. Now that's a big thing in these days, self-harming. But this man had given himself over to rebellion and self-harming. He was literally torturing himself because he was confused and he was in turmoil, riddled with guilt and with shame. And as a result,